Welcome into the PFF NFL Daily. Today, discussing the New York Jets and their offensive line. We have Duane Brown coming in off the streets to presumably play left tackle. We have Mekhi Becton, unfortunately, who is going to be moving to right tackle this year. Unfortunately, going to be out for the season with a knee injury. George Fant's moving around. So, Sam, let's talk a little bit of Jets and their offensive line shuffle, namely bringing in Duane Brown.
Well, first of all, I think the phrase is off the street, not the streets. He
Off
wasn't
the street.
homeless when they brought him in,
Yeah.
Duane Brown's done all right for himself during his NFL career. I don't think he was living in a tent under a bridge somewhere. I think
Maybe I have
they just had to
information
get
that you're
him.
not privy to. You don't know.
Look, it's possible. I've seen that documentary, right? Broke. All these athletes just squander their money and they're homeless immediately after they retire. Maybe it's true. But to the best of my knowledge, Duane Brown was simply unemployed rather than homeless. But yeah, poor old Mekhi Becton now. You hate to use the term injury prone, but Mekhi Becton's dealt with a couple of pretty significant injuries now during his time in the NFL. I think there's an automatic assumption that anytime a guy is that freaking huge, you got to wonder, like, do the biomechanical components of the body still function when you're 380 pounds, or does that make you automatically more susceptible to stuff like this? Who the hell knows? Neither of us are doctors, but Mekhi Becton's down, going to be missing the whole season. So the New York Jets decide, well, let's turn to free agency. There's still some good players out there, and they bring in Duane Brown, who I think that's a pretty good move. It's a pretty decent gamble. And look, it's not to say that Duane Brown is going to be automatically one of the best players in the league again, as he was at his best. The guy's about to be 37 years old. He's coming off the worst season he had for a while. But even that worst season was a reasonable passing, starting caliber mark at left tackle on a line that wasn't very good and an offense that wasn't great. So I think this is a pretty smart move for the Jets. Again, the Jets have been making a lot of good moves in sequence now.
Yeah, Duane Brown, he's going to be 37 for the season, so that's obviously part of a concern. Even in his down year, this was his lowest graded season in basically since his rookie season. Lowest grade since 2008. That was what we saw from him last year. But he was still number 23 in PFF WAR. He's been a better pass protector than run blocker throughout his career. So solid in pass protection. Last year we saw that wane just a little bit. But for again, it's a Jets offensive line that was really, really bad for 2 years ago, and they have slowly, as we always talk about, crept back toward average. Duane Brown, remember, completely changed the Seahawks line. They went from absolutely horrible to just bad for a while to almost pretty good, but it was like a pretty big change just adding Duane Brown to the Seahawks lineup a few years ago when they traded for him. And I think it's not the same thing with the Jets, but it's just saying, look, we lose a Mekhi Becton. George Fant has gone from developmental player to solid starting caliber type of tackle that they've paid, and they grab off the street, Sam, another starting caliber tackle that can step in and play. Look, they're doing everything they can to really learn about what they have in Zach Wilson, and this was a shrewd move to just keep that offensive line intact.
Yeah, and remember, they let Morgan Moses leave in the offseason, a guy that was going to be, or could have been a starting tackle for them. They decided to let that depth depart the building, and they just had to make sure they didn't end up with this giant glaring weakness at one of their 5 starting spots.
Yeah, so you lose one of my favorite players in Morgan Moses, but hey, Duane Brown's perfect. He's a perfect average player to help the offensive line there. So where the Jets have a solid offensive line. They have the pieces there. They have the pieces at receiver. They have done a really good job, as you say, exploring all options as far as team building goes. And this is one of those. There is a small market of players that you do want to kind of grab at the end of training camp. They were looking at Duane Brown for a while as it is. I think they were considering him even with George Fant and Mekhi Becton on the roster. So it's just another good way to add depth and just keep that baseline on the line.
I mean, look, the other thing is we assume that Duane Brown, because he's coming off the worst season he had since his rookie year, because he gave up 8 sacks last season, again, the highest total he had since his rookie year, and because he's about to be 37 years old, you assume that means we're well in the decline now, and Duane Brown's only going to get worse until, he's only got a year or two left. This is the end. But Andrew Whitworth just played at a really high level at 40. Jason Peters played at a high level at 40. We might have just seen a bad year from Duane Brown. He might have just been dealing with some injuries or wasn't 100% all season long. We assume because of his age and because it's the last thing we saw, that's the beginning of the end. Maybe Duane Brown can bounce back. Like the year before, where he was 35, late, almost 36, he had an 87 grade. Like he was one of the best left tackles in the NFL. So it's entirely possible that a gamble, just a roll of the dice to try and make sure they don't have a bad problem spot at left tackle. Duane Brown has like a bounce back season, shows he's got a couple more years left in the tank, and we end up with, a really high level starting left tackle. And ultimately, there's definitely a world where this Jets offensive line ranks top 5, top 7. They finished last year, I think, ranked 11th, something like that, headed in the right direction. Okay, losing Becton is a blow, but they add Laken Tomlinson. Elijah Vera Tucker was a bit of a roller coaster year one. If he's able to smooth that out, his highs were insane. Like his best games were 90 plus PFF grades. He looked like a guy that could be a phenomenal player. So I think there's definitely a broad range of outcomes where this offensive line is really good, even with Duane Brown there.
I want to talk about the ramifications, what this means for Zach Wilson. But first, football fans, join the next generation of fantasy football with Rainmakers Football, their first ever NFT fantasy game from DraftKings. It's the only NFT fantasy game licensed by the NFLPA. And now you can play all season for millions in prizes by building the ultimate NFT franchise. Right now, everyone can get their first full roster starter pack for free. Playing Rainmakers is simple. Buy, sell, bid, and win player card NFTs of the biggest names in the game through regular drops and auctions on DraftKings Marketplace. You can craft lineups of athletes from your NFT collection to earn points for touchdowns, receptions, and more, just like daily fantasy football. So build your NFT franchise and enter free Rainmakers football contest all season to compete for millions in prizes. The next generation of fantasy sports is here. Download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now. Sign up with promo code PFF. Click the Rainmakers tile and opt in with your first card for free. Plus, play for millions in prizes all football season long while building the ultimate NFT fantasy franchise with Rainmakers Football. It's promo code PFF. Build, play, win only at DraftKings. Contest entries dependent on type and number of NFTs held. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. I've done better. All right, it's Zach Wilson, man. Year 2, talented quarterback. We've talked a ton about he has to get rid of the ball quicker. The way you get rid of the ball quicker, I think, is decision-making, obviously, but also having receivers who get open. And now, when you add in Garrett Wilson, their first-round pick, to pair with Corey Davis and Elijah Moore and the tight ends, Tyler Conklin and CJ Uzomah, who they brought in there, all right, we've got a decent group of playmakers. The offensive line, as we mentioned, is solid. The Jets have done a good job of at least giving Zach Wilson what he needs to succeed here in year 2.
Yeah, they really have. I think between the line, the receiving weapons, the offensive scheme, everything is there for Zach Wilson to be much better this year. And if he can't, then you, I think, really have to start asking some questions about whether it's ever going to happen. And then if he can, I think the Jets are in real business and they can actually go some places. So their offensive line, it wasn't quite as great overall or in pass blocking as it was overall last year. They ranked 23rd in terms of pass blocking efficiency on the season, but I think they could be better this year. And a big part of that is, look, they ranked 23rd because of pressure given up in front of a quarterback who had one of the longest average time to throws in the NFL, did not have a great pocket presence, wasn't helping them. In fact, was hindering them by his play. So we talked about this on the big podcast before, that every sort of data point from Zach Wilson last year screams overwhelmed, in over his head, drowning, quicksand, all those things you hear about. It's the whatever anniversary of the replacements coming out, the great quicksand speech, the team meeting. That's what Zach Wilson was last year. He was drowning in the quicksand, just trying too hard and sinking deeper and deeper and deeper, and never figured out his way how to stay above the water line. Like that's a thing that can happen to young quarterbacks. You hear about the speed of the game all the time. That's kind of how it manifests itself. But now the line should be better. The receiver should be better. You should be able to get the ball out of your hands faster. The scheme is already good. It's set up for you to be okay. You had a year. You don't get longer than that in the NFL. You need to really show a development.
So it's unfortunate we're not going to get to see Mekhi Becton. Again, an intriguing prospect coming out a couple of years ago, but the Jets continue to make a lot of good moves this offseason. The latest, signing 37-year-old tackle Duane Brown. It's the PFF.